ثالثة على حب المولى أبي عبد الله الحسين بأعلى أصواتكم تؤجرون. In the name of God, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa Jafar Jahannam. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bi fina'ik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Brothers, sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we will inshallah continue where we left off in our discussion concerning the knowledge distortions that led to the tragedy of Karbala. We want to look at the importance of the sources of knowledge. We want to look at the importance of the people carrying the knowledge, the level of sincerity that they have, and the danger that they can pose when those sources of knowledge are incorrectly used, when the people carrying the knowledge use that knowledge in the wrong way. What we have done until now is to look at what we can consider the macro picture. We've looked at the big lines and the big overview of Islamic history from the time of the Holy Prophet till the time of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and the tragedy of Karbala. Now we want to look at what in sociology and other sciences they call the micro structure. We want to concentrate a little bit more on key figures and key personalities once we finish our discussion about the big trends and the big overview of history. Before we start, I'd like also to bring your attention and to ask you to keep in mind something that we mentioned a couple of nights ago. When we presented our discussion on the reliability of the reports of the tragedy of Karbala, we said that the books of Maqatil, as reliable as they are, they were only written a few decades after the actual events of Karbala. And so we left with a question. We said, how come is it that when the tragedy of Karbala actually occurred on the year 61 after Hijrah, why was it only documented a few decades afterwards? And we gave two answers that we said we're going to detail later. The first answer was that we said there was a prohibition on writing in the Islamic world. And inshallah, with the discussion that we presented last night, that topic and that subject or that answer is now clear. And the second reason we said why the event was not documented into a maqtal right away is that there was persecution. Persecution of anyone who did anything or said anything or wrote anything to give the impression that they were an ally, a follower of Imam Ali alayhi salam and of Ahlul Bayt in general. So while the theme that we're continuing to discuss is the general theme of the importance of knowledge, please keep in mind that tonight we're also trying to present the answer to the second item, to the second factor that we mentioned, for the reasons why the maqtal was not documented right away. And that is the persecution of the people who associated with Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So generally speaking, what we're trying to look at right now is to look at the events of Karbala and to ask the same question that we already asked. How could this nation, this community, this society that is considering itself to be followers of this man, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, only 50 years after his passing away, turns around and kills his grandson in this manner, in the tragic manner in which he was killed in Karbala, along with his companions and family members? How could they do this only 50 years later, while at the same time still saying that they are lovers and followers of the Holy Prophet? And we want to look at that question from another angle and basically say, what are the big factors, what are the precursors that led the Imam to actually rise, that led the Imam to actually openly challenge and openly object to Bani Umayyah? When right before him, and up until that point, the Imam had lived in a different way, and he had not risen in this manner that he did in the tragedy of Karbala. So to start with, we're going to continue where we left off in the history of Islam. There's no doubt that the time that the Holy Imam was living at that time was extremely difficult, socially and culturally and politically and religiously. If we go back to the time when Imam AlHasany alayhi salam took over the Imamah after the martyrdom of Imam Ali alayhi salam, when the Khawarij killed Imam Ali alayhi salam in year 40, and Imam AlHasany became the Imam. And he remained the Imam from year 40 to year 50. We can already ask the question, during those years, what was Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam doing? And the short answer, without going into the details now, is that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam during those years remained as an obedient and loyal supporter of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. Yes, he was his older brother, but he was also his Imam. And during that time, whatever policies Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam decided to implement, they were fully supported by Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. During the same time, we see that Muawiyah, his main policies concentrated after the killing of Imam Ali alayhi salam on wiping out any mention of Imam Ali alayhi salam, any merits of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and anyone who follows Imam Ali alayhi salam or mentions him or sympathizes with him or who loves him, whether they are Shia in the true sense that we understand today, theologically aligned, or simply sympathizing with the Imam, they posed a danger to the kind of world or the kind of community that Muawiyah wanted to create. And in return, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam worked to oppose that movement by making sure that the merits of Imam Ali alayhi salam would continue to be documented and they would continue to be disseminated in that society. And he worked very hard to ensure the protection of those who were remaining in society, who were still adhering to the love of Ahlul Bayt, and specifically Imam Ali alayhi salam. What was happening at that time is that if anyone associates in any way, shape or form with the policies of Ahlul Bayt, with the line of thought of Imam Ali alayhi salam, they were going to be persecuted against. They were going to be cut off politically, they were cut off socially, they were cut off financially. It reached a point where people, no one dared to call any of their sons Ali or Hassan or Hussein. And this was becoming a very well-known reality in that world. There were no doubts about it. Everybody understood the world that they were living in. We know that when they doubted of the loyalty of someone, they would bring them and they would ask them to curse Imam Ali alayhi salam. And if they proceeded to curse the Imam, then they would have saved their lives in that manner. And if they don't, that's enough for someone to be killed. And as for the people who were very influential in that society, the important members of that society, that the government at the time realized they had a big following and they could influence a lot of people, they were not persecuted against right away. Instead, they tried to buy them off. They tried to bribe them. They tried to use them for their own political gain. And Muawiyah was an expert at this. And as we said, this continued to be a trend in the subsequent caliphates that came and took over the rule after Muawiyah. In the meantime, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam was able to force Muawiyah to sign a peace treaty. In exchange for letting go of the Khilafah to Muawiyah and no longer going and being at war with Muawiyah, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam presented a treaty, a peace treaty to Muawiyah, that Muawiyah had no longer any option but to accept. Part of that peace treaty, and we don't have time to analyze the conditions of that peace treaty, part of it is that Muawiyah was going to have, if he was going to respect that peace treaty, he was going to have to no longer persecute the Shia. He would no longer be allowed to follow people and track them down and punish them and torture them and kill them because they were the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. That's what Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam was doing. And while Muawiyah said that he was no longer going to accept these conditions right from the beginning, in fact he did accept them because he wanted to become the Khalifa officially. Which means that every time he would do something, he was openly revealing to everyone that he was going against the peace treaty that he had just signed, which was increasingly revealing his true colors to the rest of the society. He may have tricked some people, but the Imam al-Hasan created a condition where it would be out in the open. If we look at the subsequent events, we see Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam become the Imam right after the martyrdom of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam in year 50. So Imam al-Hasan was a Imam for about 10 years, after which Imam al-Hussein takes over. He did not start by rising against Muawiyah right away. In fact, Imam al-Hussein continued with the same policies, to the same positions, political positions that Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam had put in place with Muawiyah. One of the things that were very important to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam were to continue with the activities of Imam al-Hasan, who was trying to disseminate the merits of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And so every year he would gather the people. We are told in history the biggest Islamic conference that would take place used to take place in the season of pilgrimage during the Hajj season on the 11th of the Hijjah, where Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, like Imam al-Hasan used to do, he would gather all of Bani Hashim and all of the scholars who would be in attendance in the pilgrimage. And he would take days and nights continuously sitting in front of people on the pulpit in the season of Hajj, and he would repeat and tell them to write down the merits of Imam Ali alayhi salam, so that when they go back, they have something documented that they can read to their people. Of course, keep in mind the discussion that we had yesterday regarding the prohibition of the hadith. We see how Ahlul Bayt were countering this. We're countering this movement and these tendencies to wipe out all documented ahadith. We are also told at that time that there are people who were supposed to be very close companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam, who were waiting for one way or another to get out of the peace treaty of Imam al-Hasan with Muawiyah because they were against it. We are told, for instance, that there is a man by the name of Ju'da ibn Hubayra. He was a companion of Imam Ali alayhi salam, but he was against the peace treaty of Imam al-Hasan with Muawiyah. So as soon as he heard that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had taken over the Imam and Imam al-Hasan had been killed, he wrote to the Imam. And he told him, we're no longer under the shackles of the peace treaty that was signed between you and Muawiyah, between Imam al-Hasan and Muawiyah. We are your companions and your followers. Take us into war against Muawiyah. And Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam wrote back to him saying, so long as this tyrant, referring to Muawiyah, is sitting on the throne, all of you shall remain in your homes. So Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was implementing and continuing the same policies that Imam al-Hasan had put in place. He was telling them the time is not right now to rise against Muawiyah. And then we see Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam started to see how Bani Umayyah were becoming more and more aggressive and more open in the manner in which they were doing their oppression in society. So we are told that Muawiyah wrote to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam threatening him. He told him, I hope that you do not dare to conspire or to work against me in any way, otherwise I will crush you. And this is when we have Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam starting to take a very open and confrontational role with Bani Umayyah. This is where it started. So we see Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and we have to consider this as the precursor movements to Karbala. So Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam wrote back to Muawiyah. And in that letter, which really deserves to be analyzed, and we have no time to analyze it right now. It's a long letter. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam starts by listing the crimes of Muawiyah. And one of the first things that he lists, he says, are you not the one who killed Hujr ibn Adi and those great companions of his? When you had given them an oath and you had given them your word that you were no longer going to persecute them. And of course the Imam continues with the names of other people that Muawiyah killed. And I'm not going to go into the details. At the end of the letter, and that letter really deserves to be studied, the Imam of course says, and you have claimed and you have warned me against being a fitna for this ummah. I swear to God that I do not know a fitna greater on this nation of the Messenger of God than your governance and your rulership over it. So now the defiance was becoming a lot more clear. What I wanted to concentrate on right now is this specific verse, this specific part of the letter of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, where he mentions the crimes of Muawiyah, starting with the killing of Hujr ibn Adi. Before we talk about the killing of Hujr, in order to understand it properly, we need to understand the role of a man who used his knowledge and the position of his knowledge to get Hujr ibn Adi killed. And then we need to understand who Hujr ibn Adi is, so that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam gives this much importance to the man, and he mentions him in this manner as though this is a great crime that Muawiyah did, and that we can consider a precursor to the entire movement of Karbala. The man that we're talking about that used his knowledge and his position of knowledge in that society to get the man called Hujr ibn Adi killed is a man by the name of Shurayh al-Qadi. Who was Shurayh al-Qadi? Shurayh al-Qadi used to be a man that history tells us his ancestors came from Persia. And then they lived in Yemen, and he may have lived in Yemen, and then they went to live in Kufa, and he was attributed to the tribe of Kinda. We are told that he entered Islam at the hands of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali alayhi salam, when the Holy Prophet sent Imam Ali to Hadramaut in order to preach Islam. And at that time already, this man, he was already known to be extremely intelligent and extremely knowledgeable among the Arab. And so when Imam Ali alayhi salam came, and I don't have time to give the entire story, it's a beautiful story if you want to read it. He asked Imam Ali alayhi salam, what is this new religion that you're preaching? What are its main tenets? What are you trying to preach? What are you trying to present to the world? What is this religion? And so the Imam read verses of the Quran, one verse after another. He read 3 or 4 verses, and they were enough for Shurayh to enter into Islam and to accept Islam. And the main reason he quotes for entering Islam is because he sensed, and Imam Ali alayhi salam in the history, we are told, knew this man's background. So he gave him an answer that was appropriate for him. This man's background, right from his childhood, and because of certain events that had happened with his father and his mother, had a very strong sense of justice. So the Imam gave him verses of the Quran that emphasize the role of justice in Islam. And this is what attracted this man to Islam. Right from the beginning, he entered Islam, but he remained in his own city. He did not come to visit the Holy Prophet. We are told for 5 years he tried to come visit the Prophet, but he was always too busy and things happened. And finally, when he was on his way to visit the Prophet, he was told that the Prophet had passed away. So he never got to visit the Prophet. What happened afterwards? If we go back to the books of history, we are told that this man became so knowledgeable and he was recognized, his intelligence and brilliance was so easily recognized that at the time of Umar he was made into the main judge of the city of Kufa. And Uthman maintained him in his position as the main judge in the city of Kufa. And Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he became Khalifa, he also maintained him as the main judge in the city of Kufa. And in fact, there is an incident, I'm guessing many of you have heard about it, but I'll say it in summary very quickly. We're told one day Imam Ali alayhi salam was walking and he saw either a Jewish man or a Christian man who was selling either an armor or a shield. And when the man saw that, when Imam Ali alayhi salam saw the item, he said, "This item belongs to me. I lost it a while back, but I recognize it now. This item belongs to me." The man said, "No, this is mine, and I want to sell it." So Imam Ali alayhi salam told the man, "What do you want to do?" And they agreed that they were going to go to the judge. Now Imam Ali alayhi salam at that time was the Khalifa of the Muslimin, the Khalifa of the Muslim world. He went together with this man, the Jew or the Christian at that time. They went together to the court where the judge sat, and he asked them to present their case. Then he asked Imam Ali alayhi salam, "Do you have any evidence for what you're saying? Do you have any witnesses that can bear witness that this is your shield or your armor?" The Imam said, "No, I do not." So the judge said, "Then this shield must remain in the hands of the Jewish man or the Christian man. There is no evidence." And so Imam Ali alayhi salam said, "This is the actual correct ruling, you may keep it." But the man just stood there in amazement. He would not move. And Imam Ali alayhi salam told him, "What's the matter?" And he said, "I cannot believe what I just witnessed. I am a non-Muslim man living on Muslim land, and I have just taken the Khalifa of the Muslim world to court, where the judge ruled objectively and with justice in my favor, and I was not punished, and I was not insulted, and I was not killed, and I'm going to leave with the item in my hand. I have just witnessed Allah's justice on earth in front of me." And then he entered into Islam right away because of that. And then he told the Imam, "I must confess that the shield actually belongs to you, and that you had dropped it at night without noticing, and I had picked it up and I was about to sell it." And we're told Imam Ali alayhi salam told him, "You may keep the shield now, it's a gift for you." The judge in that incident was Shurayh al-Qadi. So this man remained in his position of being a judge in that time. And history tells us he remained for 60 years the main judge, one of the longest lasting and ruling judges in the history of Islam. He remained the main judge in the city of Kufa, the metropolis, the capital of the Islamic world, for 60 years, until he was about 108 or 7 years old, 1 year before he died. Okay, so what's the issue with this man? In some reports we have, they're attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam. He says Shurayh is the most competent of the judges of the Arabs. They're attributed to the Imam alayhi salam who says that. So there's absolutely no lack in this man's objectivity, and this man's intelligence, or this man's knowledge. But there was a lack somewhere else. Shurayh al-Qadi had a weakness. And his weakness is that if you knew how to put an envelope of money in front of him, you could make him say anything. Even though he was known that he could take his family members, and the narrations and the history we are told, he jailed his own son, he jailed his own brother, because in his mind, justice knows no family ties. Yet, if you knew how to bribe him, then you had no issue in getting him to say whatever you wanted. We are told that later, after all of these incidents, after these incidents with Imam Ali alayhi salam, he remained as the judge. All the way to the days, for instance, of Abdul Malik, who apparently would have paid him something like 10,000 dirhams as soon as he took over the rulership, the Khilafah. He paid him, he sent him an envelope of 10,000 dirhams, and he gave him a house in the city of Fallujah. And he told him, so long as you accept to remain my judge, these envelopes are going to continue to come your way, to protect his own political and personal interests as a ruler. So what is the issue? The issue is that man, Shurayh, could be bought with money. And the biggest crime, or the series of crimes that we want to hold against him, is not the petty crimes, or not the small ones. The biggest in the series of important crimes that he committed against this religion, despite his status, despite his knowledge, is that of the killing of Hujr ibn Adi that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam just referred to when talking to Muawiyah. So now we have to go back to understand who is this Hujr ibn Adi. Hujr ibn Adi, when he passed away, the death of his news reached the people, everybody was frustrated, everybody was angry, everybody was surprised, whether they were from the followers of Ahlul Bayt or they were from a different camp. We are told that when Hujr ibn Adi was killed, before I go to his killing, let me mention a few things about his life. Initially, Hujr ibn Adi was one of the very few companions who actually attended the burial of Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. Abu Dharr had been exiled by Uthman because he kept speaking out against the policies of Uthman and Bani Umayyah. And Uthman got fed up of him, so he exiled him to a region in the desert called Al-Rabada, where Abu Dharr passed away out of hunger and thirst. He died. The great companion Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. And of course, people were forbidden from bidding him farewell when he left and forbidden from attending. So only a handful of people bid farewell to Abu Dharr when he was pushed out of the city, including Imam Ali alayhi salam and Al-Hasany and Al-Hussein, and very few people attended his actual burial. Hujr ibn Adi was one of those people. So we're starting to see what kind of man he was. We're told that once Imam Ali alayhi salam, in one of his sermons to the people of Kufa, he told them, "O people of Kufa, seven men who are the best among you are going to be killed. And one of them," he didn't mention the others, "and one of them is Hujr." Okay. In another narration, we have that, I can skip those due to lack of time, but we're told, let's go to the other camp. The camp of the people who are not with Imam Ali alayhi salam and Ahlul Bayt. Al-Hasan al-Basri, we are told, he says that Muawiyah committed 4 crimes that were of such gravity that if he had committed one of them, everybody would have to agree that his sins are unforgivable. And he lists the crimes, and the last one he lists is the killing of Muawiyah, of Hujr ibn Adi and his companions. We are told that when Aisha heard of the killing of Muawiyah, of Hujr ibn Adi, she wrote a letter to Muawiyah. And in it she said, "Have you really killed Hujr ibn Adi and his companions? Where is your tolerance, Muawiyah? I swear that I heard the Prophet of God say that there will be people killed in Marj Adra," which is the region where Hujr ibn Adi was killed and where his grave still resides today in Syria. "I swear that I heard the Prophet of God say that there will be people who are killed in Marj Adra, for whose killing the inhabitants of the heavens will be angered." So this was Aisha writing to Muawiyah. And we have, even in the history of Muawiyah, we are told that after the killing of Muawiyah even regretted himself having killed Uday and his companions. He would say about himself, "I can no longer consider myself a tolerant man for having killed him. No longer consider myself a wise or patient man for what I have done." And we are told that on his deathbed, Muawiyah would often say, speaking to Hujr as though Hujr was no longer there, he would say to Hujr, "I swear to you, Hujr, that my day in front of you and God is going to be a very long one." So this is what Muawiyah would say. Let's go to the history books to see what do they say about this man, Hujr ibn Adi. If we go to the books, a number of them, and I want to go very quickly without giving too much detail. Tabaqat ibn Sa'd. It mentions about Hujr ibn Adi that he was Jahiliyan Islamiyya, which means that he had lived in the time of Jahiliyyah and that he entered then Islam. What else? That he was alive at that time, and that he was a thiqatan ma'rufa. So he was very trustworthy and known for his trustworthiness. If we go to Usd al-Ghaba, another book that tells us the biographies of the companions of the Prophet, all of these Sunni resources of hadith, it mentions in that book that he had come from his city to the city of Al-Madinah al-Munawwara to meet the Prophet and to say the Shahada at the hands of the Prophet. So he entered Islam by reciting the Shahada in front of the Holy Prophet. Why is this important? Because it establishes that he was a companion of the Prophet by the definition of the Sahaba that they have. Because today when you read the books of commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari and others, they tell you that he was a tabi'i, that he was of the second generation of Sahaba. He was not there with the time of the Prophet, with the Holy Prophet. When the books of history say that he was among the companions of the Prophet. And he was not a normal companion. In other books we have in Al-Isti'ab fi Ma'rifat al-Ashab, in the Tarikh ibn Asakir, we have Al-Marzabani, we have in many of the other works. What else do they say about him? They say he was, in addition to being extremely trustworthy, he was known to be one of the best Sahaba of the Holy Prophet and one of the most famous ones. So if you're going to list the Sahaba around the Prophet, you have to mention him. And they say he was one of the best despite his young age. And Al-Marzabani says that he was called Rahib al-Sahaba. He was the monk of the Sahaba. And in another place he says he was one of the known Ubbad. He was one of the people who spent his time in worship. And every time he would lose his wudu, he would never lose his wudu before renewing it. And as soon as he renewed it, he performed a prayer. And he was known to be mustajab al-da'awat. So that when people wanted to ask something from Allah and they feel that He's not answering their prayers, they would come to Hujr ibn Adi to ask him to pray for them. This is all in the time of the Holy Prophet. And then if we fast forward, so we have an idea about who that man was in the time of the Prophet. And then if we fast forward to the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, we are told that he was one of the first to give his allegiance to the Imam when the Imam became a Khalifa. And then we are told that the Imam right away appointed him in the most sensitive positions of command in his military army. So he was one of the commanders of Imam Ali alayhi salam in the Battle of the Camel. He was one of the commanders of Imam Ali alayhi salam in the Battle of Siffin, where we have a whole history about him in the Battle of Siffin. We are told he was one of the first two men to attack in the duels, the first duels in the Battle of Siffin with Imam Ali. We are told that he is one of the men who killed one of the most commanders on the side of Muawiyah when he was under Imam Ali. We are told that during the Battle of Siffin, when we hear often the story, Imam Ali alayhi salam heard people cursing and insulting Muawiyah. Hujr ibn Adi was one of them. And so the Imam came to them and he told them, I do not like for you to be amongst the people who insult and curse. It would be better for your speech if you simply described the wrongdoings instead of cursing them and insulting them. And Hujr ibn Adi in that instance said, yes, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, we will obey your commandment and be disciplined by your manners. So this gives us an idea of who this man was. In the Battle of Nahrawan, he was one of the commanders of Imam Ali alayhi salam, leading either the entire right flank of the army or the left flank of the army. We are told that after the Battle of Nahrawan, Muawiyah would send people to invade Iraq, parts of Iraq. One of the people that he would send was Al-Dhahak ibn al-Qais. He would send him with perhaps 3,000 people or more or less, and they would pillage and they would kill people and they would kill pilgrims and so on and so forth. And Imam Ali alayhi salam in that instant, he did not even go himself. He sent Hujr ibn Adi with others to quash and to defeat those invasions of the land of Iraq. This is going to start to give us an impression and a good idea of who this man was in the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam. The trust that the Imam gave and put in this man, because of his loyalty, because of his strength, because of his courage, and because of his piety. We are told that the Imam, after all of this, he once met with Hujr ibn Adi, and he told him, "O Hujr, tell me, what would you do if you were beaten and you were forced to curse me?" And of course we have many narrations like this from the Imam to Hujr ibn Adi. This is one of them. And Hujr is said in this instance to have said, "Tell me, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, what do you want me to do?" And Imam Ali alayhi salam simply told him, "In that case, and if you are forced to, then curse me, but do not betray me in your heart." But this was an indication and a prophecy of things to come later. History tells us that in the years subsequent to the death of Imam Ali alayhi salam, to his killing, we are told that Hujr ibn Adi was taken and beaten and tortured many times and asked to curse Imam Ali alayhi salam. In one of those instances, we are told the governor took him in and he beat him and he told him, you must go and publicly curse Imam Ali alayhi salam. So Hujr said, I agree. And Hujr was released, and they say he walked right into the mosque, and the mosque was filled with people, and he stood in the mosque and he said, O people of the Kufa, the governor has asked me to stand in front of you and to curse Imam Ali alayhi salam, Ali ibn Abi Talib. So I cursed him. And they released him. But then the people started talking amongst themselves because they did not know when he said, I cursed him, did he mean I cursed the governor or I cursed Imam Ali alayhi salam? That was one of the times. Another time, Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah was standing and he was giving a sermon. And he kept cursing Imam Ali alayhi salam on the pulpit. And we are told that he started throwing pebbles at him. And another instance, he started praising Uthman and cursing, doing la'na on Imam Ali alayhi salam on the pulpit during the Friday sermon. And so we are told, this is when he stood up and read a verse of the Quran, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qist shuhada'a lillah. He read a verse of the Quran, and then he said, I bear witness that the man that you are cursing, the man that you are insulting, needs to be praised. And the man that you are praising needs to be brought down. And this continued for a while until Muawiyah got fed up. And so he organized a manner in which this man was going to be killed. So he resorted to the normal ways that he would kill those people by working usually under the radar, except this time it became a lot more open. And it became a lot more easy for people to refer back to this incident as having been triggered by Muawiyah himself. Muawiyah was killing all the companions and followers of Imam Ali alayhi salam one after the other. Malik al-Ashtar, Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, and so on and so forth. But he usually did it in a secret way. They were secret assassinations. People would put poison in their food or so on and so forth. What happened in this case? What happened is that a man in the city of Kufa wrote a testimony. And it was, of course, a fabrication. This was triggered by Muawiyah. A man who was supposed to be famous and well known in the city of Kufa wrote a testimony saying that Hujr ibn Adi had become a kafir. How did he become a kafir? Because he was rejecting the Khalifa of his time, because he preferred the descendants of Abu Talib. They hated so much the name of Imam Ali that they would not write it down. So they wrote down the name of his father, Abu Talib, meaning he prefers Imam Ali alayhi salam, Imam AlHasany, Imam al-Hussein, to the current Khilafah, and he wants to lead a revolution against the Khalifa and betray the Khalifa. That's what was written in the testimony. And then 50 people signed on it. And then they came and they gave it to who? Brings us back to the judge of that city. They gave it to Shurayh al-Qadi. And Shurayh al-Qadi signed on it. And that became the execution orders of Hujr ibn Adi and his companions. So they took that piece of paper, the letter, the execution orders of killing Hujr, and it went to the governor in the city of Marj Adra. That city which Hujr himself had conquered. He had entered that city as a military commander and he had conquered it for the Islamic world. Today, anywhere in the world, that kind of person would be considered a military hero. There would be streets and schools and museums in their names. Instead, that person was brought in front of the governor, and the governor told him, Hujr ibn Adi, you and your companions, and there were 14 of his closest companions, 2 of them were his own sons, and about 50 people who were his supporters and defenders. They all came, they were all brought by the governor. And they were told, Hujr ibn Adi, these are your crimes. And Muawiyah has decreed that you must be executed for these crimes. So be prepared to die. there is one thing, one last chance that we are going to give you if you want to save your life and the lives of your companions, and that is to curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. And in that instant, Hujr ibn Adi was categorical. Despite the fact that Imam Ali alayhi salam had told him, you may curse me so long as you don't betray me in your heart. Hujr ibn Adi was categorical in saying, I will not curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. And because of that, all of his companions stood with him. And so they were told right then and there, they brought their kaffans, they gave them their kaffans, and they told them, tomorrow morning you shall all be executed. And so Hujr ibn Adi and all of his companions spent that night in jail, praying all the way to the morning. And then, when it was the morning, he was called to get ready to be executed. And he asked them, he told them, give me 1 second, 1 moment, I'd like to perform one last prayer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they said, it's given to you, it's granted, go pray. And so he prayed 1 salah and he came back. And they wanted to mock him, so they told him, Hujr, have you become such a coward and so afraid of death that you prayed such a long prayer to try to delay your death by a few moments? And he told them, I swear to you that that was the shortest prayer I have prayed in my life. Because I knew that you were going to say I'm a coward and I'm trying to delay my death. This is the kind of man that they were going to kill. And then they told him, get ready to be killed. And he told them, no, you're going to kill my sons before me. And they said again, is it because of your cowardice? Are you afraid of dying? And he said, no. My sons, if they see how you're going to kill me, they may decide to curse Imam Ali to save their lives. And I don't want them to curse Imam Ali to save their lives. So kill them before me. And so they beheaded his first son and his second son, and then he was tied down and he was beheaded. And then we are told that they killed all of his companions, one after the other, in the most atrocious manners. And some of them were not even killed, they were buried alive in that manner. Hujr ibn Adi could have, in that instance, dissimulated his faith. But Hujr ibn Adi decided that he was going to stand up to the truth. He was going to be completely open against injustice. And it's a great honor for this man that I think anyone who had followed the news over the past few years, to see how, while he had suffered the terrorism of Muawiyah and his groups 13 centuries ago, 13 centuries later, the same people who follow the same mentality of Muawiyah came back to the grave of Hujr ibn Adi. Those same people who have always objected to going to visit the graves of the saints, the same people who have destroyed the graves of the saints, as we see in Al-Baqi', and as they did with the grave of AlHasany alayhi salam, but it was rebuilt. They came and they destroyed the grave of Hujr ibn Adi in Marj Adra. And in fact, they did not stop there. They actually dug out his body from his grave, as it was announced in the channels and the different reports in the news. 13 centuries later, this man is still posing a problem for them. Why? Because of what he stood for. And because of his alliance with the people that he stood for. People like Amir al-Mu'mineen and Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. I'm out of time, so allow me to wrap all of this up by saying that I hope that with what we have presented until now, the role of knowledge and the role of the sources of knowledge and the responsibility of the person carrying the knowledge have become clear. And unfortunately, I wish I could say this was the end of the crimes committed by someone with this type of knowledge, someone like Shurayh. I wish I could say this is the end of his crimes against Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. But unfortunately, this was only the beginning. And inshallah, we shall see the role that he continued to play, this Shurayh al-Qadi, in the next events related more directly to the tragedy of Karbala. And I hope that with what we have said until now, we can also clearly see why Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, when he wrote to Muawiyah years before, he had started the crimes committed by Muawiyah with by listing the killing of Hujr ibn Adi and his companions as one of the great crimes, and therefore one of the precursors to the events of the tragedy of Karbala. Assalamu ala al-Husayn, wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn, wa ala awlad al-Husayn, wa ala ashab al-Husayn, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi al-tayyibin al-tahirin.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.